Hey everyone, tonight we're going to talk about Stardust and what that means in the EDS space. We're going to go through a bunch of examples and what it outputted and kind of talk through what some of the benefits, why to use it, why is it special, especially in Adobe space. All right, so to get started, what is Stardust? This is the official marketing space from Adobe. Looking at different slides it has, it has before and after Stardust. After Stardust is better, maybe. And yeah, reading the slides as a pure technical architect, the only part that really made sense to me is this part where there's 4 different steps, and then having direction and then having capabilities does seem extremely good. But at high level, reading this, at least I did not understand what Stardust is at all whatsoever. So moving forward a little bit, well, let's talk about what I like to use before Stardust, which is Google Stitch. Here is a comparable thing that Google Stitch generated, right? We generated all the blocks, all the capabilities in terms of what Google Stitch thinks is good, and we build it in EDS in a different video. Anyways, yeah, so this is what I like to use for design, but and then there's folks like Cedric that mentioned this, like okay, Stardust. And and so sure, let's look at it. And then some of my esteemed eccentric coworkers keeps mentioning Stardust as well. That loves Adobe. It's like, you know what? I have more Adobe certifications I care to count. Let's give Stardust a try. So what? Okay, so what is this thing? So as I read through Adobe's documentation and skimmed through a bunch of stuff, there's the AEM and how to, and quickly I realized Stardust itself is very skill based. And if you if you're like me, who's kind of seen the transformation, right? How quickly will software as a service be replaced as skills as a service, where they complement each other, what have you, right? What is software anyways when skills can do quite a bit? And skills for those who's not as initiated, they're just basically consistent AI instructions that could really help us AI doing things more consistently, and it's quite powerful. It's like code for AI agents. So before we kind of talk about Stardust, one thing that Stardust keeps mentioning in their documentation is that it really needs impeccable to run. And this got me really interested in terms of what actually Stardust is. So before we talk about Stardust, we have to talk about impeccable. Impeccable itself has 48,000 GitHub stars, and it itself is a very great UX designer. It has a very good mission. A lot of AI designs look very generic. The point of Google Stitch and Stardust and Impeccable, especially Impeccable, since that's what Stardust is, based on. And it's really important to understand Impeccable. So if you're using Stardust, definitely read all the Impeccable stuff and then understand that Impeccable itself is a bunch of skills that you would install and you would invoke and you would use this command line. It really helps to understand how AI works in terms of what is a skill, and Impeccable is a skill library. And then adding on to this, Stardust builds on top of Impeccable in all its instructions. It really talks about leveraging Impeccable in those capabilities. It follows 4 steps. Stardust, you extract, meaning that it's possible to extract the current capabilities and understand the current design philosophies and whatnot. And as well as understand the user's intent, right? This is where Impeccable really comes in. And then it prototypes, and then it migrates over to Adobe EDS. And most folks on my LinkedIn feed loves Adobe, right? Likes Adobe Experience Manager. So this should be somewhat in your wheelhouse as well. All right, going to start us off, we're gonna look at what we're working with. So this is a Experience Workspace enabled da.live instance, right? This is a particular block called stats. We're gonna be looking at 3 blocks today. So da.live, right? We're gonna look at cards. So this is currently what's generated. So this is what we're comparing against, right? This is the default Google Stitch generated stuff. Anywho, we're gonna see if Stardust can make it better, right? So clearly it's operating for enhancement. I can't even read this. I mean, to be fair to Stitch, right? This content management, this is not what Stitch give me, but certainly green on green is terrible. They couldn't predict the image would be, green grass right there. Anyways, all right, jumping right in, let's go to a technical session. So So let's look at what I did with Stardust V1. So we're going to talk through a few things today. The first one we'll talk through is what we did in version 1. And so basically it's very simple. You kind of gotta, what I like the AI to do first, even though AI can definitely rate its own skills, I kind of want to ask AI to explain to me what is impeccable, what is Stardust, right? And by this, it does two things. Me as a human, I understand it better. Second, AI read it into its main context as the first thing. So it's like a chain prompting. So at this point, me and AI is understanding that. And for the record, we're doing this on Fable, on Claude's Fable 5 with extra thinking. So certainly not a max thinking, but pretty close, right? This is as good as the state of art as you can get as a recording of this video in terms of, giving this thing full power. Cool. Now that I read this thing, I was like, okay. So I just give the most terrible prompt there is. So I was like, hey, these are the blocks. These are my block libraries. Figure out what they do. Let's redesign it and see how it goes. This is vague as a direction as anyone could have given it. Again, this is V1. And after some time, it built a bunch of stuff. I answered some questions. Cool. And we'll look at V1 in a second. So V1 was okay. And then now we're going to look at maybe V2, which is a lot more intense as well. So here, let's look at V2 together. All right, so V2, just using the same trick. We're gonna basically have AI read it into context, right? It's important. And then I also wanted, some of the stuff from V1 ported over, but then it's the same prompt, right? So it's like, okay, now this time I want, the version 2 to be more bold, right? Again, I'm not a designer. I have no idea what I'm saying here. It's like, hey, let's try a bold new design with Stardust, right? Let's see if we can make our good old friends from Google Stitch better, right? And we'll see if it's better. And we're using human eyes. So anyways, after some time and some amount of time building, the cool thing to note is that there's actually, this whole thing allows for really good human in the loop. You actually paused. This is actually very important. You actually paused when they gave up all the prototypes before it built in Adobe EDS. So this is where, when we think about agentic workflows, agentic gates, this is super important for AI to do, is that AI needs to pause and give humans and teams a chance to react to the work and refine the work before it makes it into the EDS thing. But anyways, of course, right, this is an Adobe skill, it has, solid capabilities on Adobe things. And then, yeah, let's, so understanding that it took, this is again, Fable Extra, the state of the model right now with extra thinking, extra high thinking. So with that, let's take a look at the output. Okay, so we started with the main, right, the default Google Stitch. It seems pretty good. And we're gonna look at what the main is and all the blocks it modified. So first, right, just as a baseline, Google Stitch did build me, quite a few blocks, right? 12 blocks in total, or 14 blocks in total, and then it has about, 3, 4, 5, 6 variations for each block, right? So Google Stitch did all that, and then we had this built. So, and then we also have the V1, right? You can tell the V1 and the default, I can't know if anyone's better, but certainly, right, this is not helpful. But what is super cool about V2, since I did tell it to make it a little more modern, right? You changed the font, it made more text. You can see the accessibility hover is different, right? The whole thing feels different. So Google Stitch did the main, and yeah, certainly I think if I were to have taste, I would say they're all about the same, but I'm not a taste guy here. All right, so let's move on. So let's look at Hero, right? This is what this is the Hero set of blocks that we built before with Google Stitch, right? So that's the default. This is the version 1. Basically, I just told them make it better. And I would objectively say this is actually better than Google Stitch. But certainly, right, one agent had one chance to one-shot it. Another agent has a chance to enhance it. Certainly, it's not exactly a good test of Stitch versus impeccable plus Stardust, but it certainly has potential, right? Clearly understand what EDS is about and, build me some nice Hero things. All right, let's look at the version 2 of Heroes, right? Again, this is the more bigger remake and restyle. Looking at this, yeah, I can see it. It's certainly for a modern thing, not for hiking, but certainly for a modern thing, it gets its thing down pretty pat. All right, so we looked at the Hero block. Let's look at the next block, which is the stats block. Again, this is what, what Stitch one-shotted before. it's okay. The spacing's okay. This is not great. So V1, right? So this is done using Stardust V1 in a real EDS website with a feature branch. Yeah, I would say I like this more. I like the theming. I like the coloring. I think there's a gradient, or maybe I'm making stuff up. But I like this more than this. So I can definitely sense the improvement. And especially the navigation just looks, at least the footer looks better. Anyways, but looking at V2 here, so this is the new stats block. I think I like it. Like I like the spacing, especially in both V1 and V2 compared to the V0. I think I like Stardust's work. But I think a lot of the capabilities here is that, right, with lots of tokens and the most data of the model with extra thinking, right, all this can be done using 2, 3, 4, 5 prompts, right? And that's the big call out, is it's 2, 3, 4, 5 prompts using the Stardust set of skills. Okay, last one we had compares card. I actually like this one quite a bit from Stitch originally. It hovers, right? There's animation. It seems cool. So looking at what it gave us for V1, yeah, I personally cannot tell the difference between the two, but whatever, this seems good. And then, yeah, of course, V2, right, I told it to do a brand new redesign. And yeah, it looks, the hover effect, I like the red outline. So, right, so this is where clearly I didn't actually review the design, but the Google Stitch originally, as well as Stardust, did do a redesign. So at this point, we looked at a few examples. Can I confidently say that yes, Google Stitch can do design? Yes. Can Stardust also design? Absolutely yes. I think the biggest difference, right, between, for me at least, between Google Stitch and then Stardust is that A uses impeccable, which is make it comparable to Google's capabilities, and I can use Fable with it, which versus using Gemini Flash, which is baked into Stitch. The other thing that's notable is that it understands Adobe very well, since it is an Adobe skill, right? It clearly did the EDS implementation in one shot. And then this is what we're looking at. Potentially, yes, we could refine the design better. Yes, the prototypes and all that stuff that I did not have time to show today, but yes, it does have really good step-by-step that blends well with the human gates. That's part of this. And then while I was reading this, like, what is all this, right? There's deploy. But yes, eventually the human gates made sense to the documentation. And then, right, and then the last part, I think one of the crown jewels, kind of bringing it back to Adobe Experience Manager a little bit as well, right? Clearly, Adobe has invested in capabilities, and looks like Paolo from Basil committed to quite this a bit. This is kind of like a very compressed version of a lot of Adobe skills that into one large skills MD, right? That potentially has the capabilities to literally style a thing from static HTML from impeccable. And if I were to say that what is the MVP of Stardust, right, it would be this file, and it's probably compressed from other Adobe skill files. Anyways, so hopefully watching this video, you understood what is Stardust, right? So Stardust is based off of impeccable. Before ever using Stardust, you need to understand how impeccable works, because that is basically what is actually doing the design. However, like most consultants, right, we try to answer one question up. Like most product companies like Adobe, they try to also, right, figure out what matters to a potential client, right, that wants to do this, and then they broke it down in 4 separate steps. And then invertedly, whether intentionally or not, they actually put in the right human gates where Adobe think is the correct human gates, right, for basically design, for kind of review, prototyping, and then eventually once all that feels good, design system, if you want to call this a design system, then, right, it gets built in Adobe EDS in one single shot with Claude Fable 5 extra thinking. So, well, hopefully this helps. It certainly helped me by making this video. I have no idea what Stardust was until this weekend, and yeah, thank you for the people that told me about it. Yeah, looking forward to how this is all evolving. Thank you so much, and hope everyone have a great night.